So I've got a couple of questions to kick off this session, and then we'll see what things that we get from the floor as well. So, Graham, a lot of interesting things been going on recently in Dynata. Exciting times, I'm sure. Thinking about all the different aspects that are going on, what sort of machine intelligence is already at work inside the organization?
Thanks for that question, Ray. Really appreciate it. Two things. One is there's some work. I mean, I can't really go into a lot of detail because we're sort of at a stage when we've sort of been absorbing different companies and businesses that have really exciting sets of products and skills, and some of those are machine learn stuff. I think the main thing that we're already using for is really sort of to engage in our panel and use machine learning to sort of understand better how to engage them, and when they come into the panel, how we can best keep them there for longer, and the machine learning helps us to do that.
And Nadja, what sort of things are Factworks doing on a sort of a regular basis that are employing either machine learning or intelligence or bandits?
Well, machine learning is a topic for us, and we apply these models mainly in our analytics projects. We do have a few of them, for example, risk modeling to assess credit risk of individuals. Basically, are they going to pay or not? Or in fusion projects that we also currently often have that marry survey data and customer data for better insights. So segmentation is one example here. Another would be prediction of customer potential and share. And we also regularly employ machine intelligence in text analytics to extract relationships for large amounts of text data, also for faster coding, as machine learning suggests codes, classifications. And we build also a model for example, coding a brand list. And in terms of future steps, we are looking into developing algorithms to understand what's driving changes in brand tracking and NPS data and where the changes are coming from.
So that very nicely takes us forward into the topic of looking forwards. So, Graham, where do you think things are heading for our industry?
Two things. All technology has always been part of what we do, starting from, paper questionnaires, moving to telephone, moving to online. So I see hopefully there'll still be a need for a grown-up to be in the room to make sure that the machines aren't telling something that we don't want. And sometimes the logic of what we're trying to do isn't really there on the surface, and sometimes you just need a 3,000 feet look at it. So I see it being a part of what we do. If it's just simply a clever way of coding open-enders, I don't think that's a good thing. I think if it's helping us write better questionnaires and understanding respondents better and being able to help clients predict how best to service in the future, then I'm all for that. I think sometimes, and I always use this as an example, market research is very good at saying what people are currently doing and what they're doing in the past, and hopefully machine learning will help us be better at predicting the future. Baby steps at the minute, but I think there's a lot of excitement about AI, and I think as soon as the hubris dies down, I think we'll end up with something which is really useful and really helpful.
So we've got an interesting question here about, are there any other examples you can mention of where this has been used in other topics? And I throw a couple in while Nadja and Graham, you have a think. If we think about the adaptive interview that Graham and Nadja showed us, of course, adaptive conjoint goes back to the 1980s, which used algorithms to home in on what you're doing. What we now have are some better stats and some better methods to achieve that. I think in terms of applying AI and learning, one would look at the tools being used by people like Living Lens and so on, where they're doing a lot of video transcription. So you collect that video, you get the text turned, you get the voice turned into text, and you can search the text so much easier. Other thoughts, either Graham and Nadja, of things that you've seen, things that you've done?
Yeah, well, actually, just what you mentioned and turning kind of voice data into text and then learning with text analytics on patterns there. That's actually something that Dynata and ourselves, we've looked at in the past, and especially in light of all this Alexa and digital assistants that are popping up and entering living rooms. We just also wondered for more research, is this something that is interesting as well, right? Is there in the future not only text open ends, but is it kind of the standard that it's going to be voice open ends that are just voice activated? And we had a look at text analytics in that field and compared a bit of text open ends versus audio open ends, and found that it's interesting that from a content perspective, it's very similar what you get with both. But then again, audio is much more detailed, more spontaneous, and you get longer responses, which actually makes it more easy for text analytics tools to make sense of patterns and to come up with themes. So that's also very interesting and something that we did together with Dynata in the past, for example.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, if that is possibly the way, particularly with more mobile surveys and people less kind of using emojis and stuff like that on phones, it becomes harder to sort of really interpret those things. So I think the voice aspect of it is probably more exciting, and probably, as I say, people are more likely to talk longer and describe things in more detail. I mean, I think sometimes people are naturally more like to talk over talk, and others are very concise. And I think it's very useful to sort of get the balance right, so we know which, based on the respondent type, what their how their words are meaning based on the sort of people they are.
And I think co-occurrence networks can be really powerful in text analytics here to kind of get up to the things that are frequently cited together and making up some themes and connections there. It's very exciting.
And we now have quite a provocative question, so it'll be interesting to see whether the three answers from us are the same or different. Why using manual coding? Why not just use automated coding?
I think the direction clearly goes into automated coding, and this is something that we've evaluated over the past years, and we now are more shifting towards that, towards automated coding, because it gets more intelligent and it suggests you codes after you classified kind of a few open ends, and then it automatically makes suggestions, which is such a huge time saving already. And also we compared a bit manual coding versus text analytics in the past, and it's getting really better and up to a level that is very, very good on an overall level. Then again, based on some recent experiences where we had this for trackers and wanted to compare a bit what we've done before manually with text analytics, it was fine on the overall level. But then if you get to subcodes and really want to get to details, you still have this wrong classification in a way that for some clients it's not acceptable. So it kind of also depends on the quality of the data that you need and the correctness of the details.
And any thoughts, Graham?
I still think it's market research, is a belt and braces approach, and I think we need to be absolutely certain, because if there's a wastage in the open ends with slang and typos and stuff that can't be allocated, then we're just missing out on some rich data.
Yeah, I would probably go a little harder than either of you. I have not seen any project which didn't include manual training of the coder before the automated coder was using. That worked well, unless it happened to fit an earlier project. So that's why I was talking about, if you're doing a tracking project, the next wave, you might use fully automated coding. At some point, you needed to have tuned for the language that applies in this category. Because words like risk are positive in some categories, they're negative in some categories, the way they're linked together to make meaning, whether man-eating is something that eats men, or whether it's a man that eats something, changes by category. So we start off with some training, and then we use automated coding, I think is much more the pattern. And as Nadja was saying, the more we go forward, the more you will be able to start with automated.
Yes, exactly, and there's happening so much in that field, right? And if you think of manual coding, it's not perfect, right? I mean, everybody codes differently. It's also very subjective, and if you give the same list of to be coded answers, it's going to be very, very different depending on who's actually doing the coding. So that just wanting to highlight that even manual coding is not the gold thing here, the gold standard.
Absolutely. If we were talking about gold standard, it would be to have 2 people code every verbatim that was coded, and then for the machine to highlight the ones that came up with different codes. And that used to be done when I was a young man, and I don't think anybody is doing that now.
No.
So, are there any other questions out there with the listeners? If not, we will thank Graham and Nadja for joining us today. I hope you found it useful from the audio. Oh no, we've got one more. So what software are you guys using for machine learning? Nadja, do you know what the software is?
Yeah, we've got different. So we have some part is Python, some is R based. There's also some open library things that we use, but then again own code. So that's what went into this adaptive algorithm here.
That's super. I did an interview with Aji Kosh, who is head of analytics and research at Sky recently. And his big plea is that he would like to see agencies use more open source, so Python and R, because actually it's not the software that's the secret sauce. The secret sauce is knowing when to do the research, how to design the research. So I think he would be very pleased to hear that, Nadja. Okay, thank you so much. Let's move to the wrap-up session. Thank you everybody for attending. We hope that you enjoyed that NewMR webinar and ideally found it both interesting and useful. We love producing all of these webinars for the research and the insights industry, but it does cost money. We have licenses, we have editing, we have tech team, and so on to provide for. And almost all of that cost is met by the NewMR sponsors. So we'd like to give a really big thank you to all of these people you see here on the page, the people who make it possible for us to bring all of these webinars and the blogs and all the rest of it to you. You can say thank you to these people too by visiting their website or asking for a quote the next time you're looking for one of their services. And when you do, please do mention that you saw that they were sponsors of NewMR. That will help give them the confidence to continue being sponsors of NewMR and its services, webinars, blogs, and so on. You could also become a sponsor of NewMR if you wanted. If you would like to find out about the sorts of packages we have, please contact us. And you can find out more about what we do and how to contact us at the newmr.org website.